Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Mike Gibbs. I'm the founder and CEO of Go Cloud Architects, and I'm here today with my friend Sandeep Das, who's actually over in India. Many of you know me as a cloud architect, enterprise architect, network architect, who teaches people how to get their first cloud architect job. In fact, I've been working in technology actually since 1993, but I won't say that. I'm just going to say 25 years. And I've been working with others to help them get their first tech job or get promoted in tech for the last 2 decades now, and it's something I absolutely love to do. There are times in life where you meet people that are so good at what they do that you just want to do things with them, and that's how I feel about Sandeep Das. I focus on architecture-related careers, and that's what I love. I love designing things, but things need to be built too. And as we migrate to the cloud, which is basically a virtualized network in a data center, we're getting to the point now that maybe 5 and 10 years from now, we go from lift and shift architectures, which is take it from the cloud and pop it to the data center, to more of these, infrastructure as code, more of these DevOps related things. And it is there, and it's really important. Now, today, architecture is all system design, but maybe 10 years from now, there's going to be a lot more marriage of these two skills. So obviously they're different careers, but they're both really important. If I design it and there's nobody to build it, well, got a problem. Or if somebody can build it without the ability to go to the customer, figure out their business, legal, technical, and regulatory requirements, and then sell it to the customer, there's nothing for them to build. So it really takes both kinds. With that, I'm honored and privileged again to have Sandeep Das on this channel. Sandeep is going to talk about, realistically speaking, DevOps. You know what we're going to talk about today? I'm going to talk about, what it takes and the skill sets necessary to become a cloud architect. And Sandeep's going to talk about what are the skill sets necessary to become a great DevOps engineer and how to kick off your career. So let me turn this over to Sandeep, let him talk a little bit, let him introduce himself. Then we'll basically separate the careers. And then from there, we'll talk about the path. And of course, anything we do, we're going to open it up to a tremendous amount of questions and answers because we want to make it a very live and interactive discussion. So Sandeep, over to you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for scheduling this excellent session. So yeah, in this session, we'll be talking about like what it takes to become a DevOps engineer. Of course, what it takes to be a cloud architect as well. But the confusing part here, I think that everyone get confused. Like everyone talks about like ultimately you are doing something in the cloud. So how can you become then cloud architect? How is different from DevOps engineering? And people actually ask me the question. So Sandeep, is coding required for the cloud architect? Is coding required for the DevOps engineer? So they every time ask this kind of questions. Now, very importantly, people who don't want to code, like there are people who want to come in the cloud, but they don't want to do coding. So they ask me, it's just even now, like few minutes back, one asked like, I don't like coding, but I want to come into cloud and explore the cloud services and work as a cloud like engineer some position. Do I really need to know the coding and all? I said no. Like as you say in the last session itself, that if you want to become a cloud architect, you need to understand about the creating the design and communicate with the customer, and solution actual building up part should be pushed to the DevOps engineer, actual implementation engineer. So these are the differences. People still get confused. I think this session will definitely help everyone to come and like have a clear idea what it is and what it is not, what need to be done to become a cloud architect and what need to be done to become a DevOps engineer. I think that will be a great session.
Thank you so much, Sandeep. And that's why I want to do this. I like to demystify the confusion, as do you, Sandeep. And here's the reason from my perspective. If a cloud architect on average earns about 600 US dollars per day, and if they're studying sysops and DevOps, and it takes them 6 to 9 months to do that, 6 months is $72,000 of lost income. 9 months is about $100,000 of lost income. So I want people to get to the goals quickly. And if it's DevOps, I got to tell you, that's a great career. And if that's architecture, that's also a great career. I just want people to get to their goals as fast as possible to have some financial success. But it's not just that. Sandeep, you're a really strong DevOps engineer, but you're focused on it. If you were spending half of your time becoming CXO relevant to be used to how do you present to the CEO, and the next how do you present to the CIO, and then you spend all day doing ROI modeling, how effective do you think you'd be as a DevOps engineer?
That means then who's going to build the DevOps solutions? I mean, ultimately, so there's two parts. Actually, communicate with the clients or like CTO, CEO, or maybe CIO, and someone need to build up the minimum viable product. We call it either proof of concept or minimum viable product. Otherwise, what thing you're going to show to the consumer or the customer, I mean, or the client, whatever you want to call it. You need to have something to show first to make them believe for it. So have the design, the initial design ready, ask the DevOps engineer to make the design, make the actual implementation, have a demo ready, and then the cloud architect should go to the CIO, CTO or CIO to have a presentation. And then based on the feedback, everything will go in a loop. So this is how it is done. Like this has to be.
It has to be. That's the whole point. I can go meet with a client. I can go ask them their business, legal, technical, and regulatory requirements. I can then evaluate their systems. And in the process of evaluating their systems, I'm probably going to bring some engineers to do it because they're going to be the super technical people. They're going to be looking through logs, looking at performance data of the network, of the servers, the containers. They're going to be looking at utilization load balance. Somebody's got to do this in depth, and that's the engineers. But they need somebody like me to design it and sell it. Because if somebody can't design it, convince the customer they need it, and there's no product, there's no architecture. So it really is a marriage and a team that needs both sides, and they're equally important. They're just different. But going into that, I might just propose a complete solution. It might be PowerPoint and a document. And then if the customer says, I'd like to test this, I'm gonna in a proof of concept, that's great. Let me go build a team of engineers to go just do this for me to build it. And I might lead that team and be part of that team. And I'm honored and privileged to be part of that team. But as an architect, you got to lead that team. And you know why it's even harder? For people that work for me, I can say, do this. No big deal. If I've got a team of Sandeeps all over the world, people that know more about tech than you can possibly imagine to go build this stuff, and they don't work for me, it's not like I could say, hey, Sandeep, be here at 6 o'clock in the morning, because I'm not the manager. So this is called matrix management in organizations. When somebody reports directly to you, you just do this and do this now. Not that any of us would. I'm not that kind of leader. In fact, I basically have my people tell me what they want, where they want to go in the career, and I get them there and I say, just give me a couple of years to help me out along the way, and I'll get you your goal. If that's the manager leader I am. But the point is, we've got to sell it. We've got to do it. We've got to build it. So we need the people on the upper side, and these skills are completely different. So, I want to talk about what it takes to become a DevOps engineer versus what it takes to become, an architect. Because realistically speaking, they're so different. And because they're so different and there's so much misconfusion, I'll kick it off. Actually, why don't you kick it off, Sandeep, with what do you need to know to be and how do you become a DevOps engineer? And then I'll talk about how to become a cloud architect.
Sure, definitely. So the very first thing, I will start with the confusion point first. Do I need to learn about the coding or programming to become a DevOps engineer? Because this is a very important question I get from everyone. The answer is yes, at least basic of the coding. Because if you don't know coding, ultimately your job, what it is? Your job is to make the solution or the services so it will be accessible by the APIs. There will be some CI/CD solution, you will some monitoring solution, but you are the person who will be setting up all that. If you want to become DevOps engineer, you have to understand what the code does, or what are the requirement that code has, what are the libraries code needed, what are the dependencies, or maybe it can be done in a serverless way, or it can be done in a kind of containerizing way. So you have to propose all the solution to the users. Then it is your job to do it also. So ultimately developers will give you the code. Either you have to give the clear instruction to the developer how to containerize it or how to make it deployable code, because ultimate goal is to have the code as a deployable, so that the next, say, QA can be manual tested, or there will be some automated test to be running, and after that it will go to the staging, and QA approves it goes to production. Or if you just need do a continuous deployment, it will go from the staging to production directly. So all this logic you have to set, and this instruction you have to give to developer. But if you don't know anything about coding, you don't know anything, how can you give the suggestion to developer? So that's the point. You need to know about the basic coding so that you can understand the coding structure and the binaries, what it call and all, and then you can give suggestion to the developers. And not just that, in deployment, there are certain things called deployment script. So a deployment script is what? Like if you have application, how from this application source code, will have a deployable code or binary, or maybe the final executable code that need to be run in a staging or production server. So that build to make it happen, you need certain type of commands. And to write, if you don't know about the commands, how can you even write it? So you need to know the basic Linux or you can just say scripting commands as well, because those will be needed everywhere. Whenever you do the continuous deployment or any kind of deployment implementation, if you do, you need that. So that's I answered the basic question. Do we need to learn the coding or not? Now, what I will say, focus on the Linux, not all the commands or the basic commands, or maybe all the compute related command, all the networking commands, and all the log collection command, because these are the things that will be most requirable whenever there is some debugging needed or maybe some data collection needed. That will be required. And after that, if you learn the basic Linux command, think about, instead of doing it manually, how can you collect all that automatically, like running cron jobs. Like suppose based on an event or an error happens, there should be some automatic script which check for the errors, and that actually push the logs to the server, and then server, you have alert set up, it will go to the concerned developers. So that way you can automate the things, it will take less time and there is less manual interaction. So that is the goal also. So ultimate goal is to make sure the time is taking the 2 months or maybe 1 week back, it should take the less time. So you save the time and you can focus the time you're saving into actually improving the application codes or maybe something else better. Okay. So in DevOps, I think one concept is very popular. If it can be made it automatic or like automation can be added there, make it automated. That should be your default go-to statement. So yeah, that's you need at least the Linux basics and the shell scripting. Then some cases I would say learn at least one programming language. Now there are many programming languages I know available, and many suggest multiple things. Now the one that will be very useful, not just for the DevOps cases and all, if you want to write advanced scripting or advanced logic statements, because sometimes you might have to do 10 kind of things via single code, or maybe communicate with databases, and then pull some parameters and then execute the parameters and save the data. To do all that, shell scripting will be really tough to do. In that case, if you know any programming language, that will be a lifesaver. In that case, you have multiple options, as I said in the beginning. And the popular one is the Golang. And I think like most of the softwares you use as a DevOps engineer are built using Golang. If you don't know, you can search about it. So Golang is a good choice. And after that, Python is also a good choice. So you can do more compute intensive tasks. And of course, you can create complicated statements or complicated scripts. And after that, if you think these two languages are tough, you're having a hard time to understand all, I think you can go for the JavaScript, because I think anyone start with their career maybe as a programmer or software engineer, anything. Okay, they start with the simple HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So if you learn about simple JavaScript, if you have simple JavaScript knowledge, you can start with Node.js, because ultimately it's a backend part you're handling, the system interaction you're doing. So you need some backend language. So for that case, you will be using the JavaScript, but the platform will be Node.js. So these are the options you have when you want to work the DevOps engineer. You need to learn basic shell scripting and Linux. You need to learn the programming knowledge. Okay, that's two done. Now let's come to the what are the other tools or popular tools you need to learn. I think immediately after knowing the basic of programming, you should focus on containerizing application, because you have to think about, to run a program, you need a lot of binaries, a lot of say Node, let's say Python. To run Python, you need all the requirements. You need to know maybe some other binaries. And if you suppose you're running in server 1, and now if you're moving to server 2, you have to again install all that again. And if you had thousands of server, until unless you do some kind of virtualization, it is a very, very tough thing. I think it's not humanly possible to manage all the servers manually. No one does it. I've never seen anyone to do it. Mike, did you see anyone like them?
I've seen some people that manage 100,000 servers, and they have operations teams that have 100+ people in them. They have 10 CCIEs on staff for the network. Then they have 50 Linux admin people. Then they have 30 security people, and they've got. So I've seen people that do it, mostly big banks and organizations that can literally spend $50 million a year on their IT staff. So yes, I've seen it, but it's not practical, and that's why what you're describing is really the way to go.
Yeah. So think about that. I mean, okay, it's a big company, big banks. They have the money, they can do it. But the small companies, the startup companies who try to lower their cost as possible, they possibly can't even if they see you are proposing this, you will be out of the job in the next day. That I can guarantee.
So right.
So they cannot allow it, and it's not practical. So what is practical? you should have some kind of virtualization. You should have some kind of image which can be copied to a number of replicas. So ultimately what will happen, suppose you have 100 users, you're getting requests from 100 users and one service enough to handle it. Suppose there is say 500 users, so that's one server cannot handle 500 persons. You have to add some kind of automatic logic. So as soon as the load increase, so based on the say user the request count, or maybe based on the kind of CPU load, you have to add servers so that it can handle the extra load. And this kind of automation only possible if you have some kind of image. So whenever new server spin up, I mean the need came up, it can use the image and start the server like everywhere is happening. I think in IAM or anything like in the AWS itself is called AMI, where you can like have the image ready and that you can utilize for the automating instances. Okay. Now, even better than that, if you do virtual like containerization using the Docker or other similar kind of tools, you can have simple Docker image and you can run that Docker image in any number of machine wherever there is the Docker is installed, the Docker machine is installed. And that way you are achieving like the best possible migration scenario here. Whatever binaries, whatever the dependencies, whatever thing your application need is inside the container or Docker or whatever container it is, say the Docker container, and that can be done anywhere in the world if you that machine have the Docker machine, and that giving you migration. Suppose you're running in on-premise, next you want to move to the cloud, it is easy as pie if you have this kind of containerization logic in place. So as a DevOps engineer, if you learn this kind of containerization techniques, especially Docker and Kubernetes, you will have a very kind of less headache or panic when you do the migration job. So that's one thing. And even I think all other in cases of microservices also, this containerization logic is very popular, so you might want to check that out. And if you after like knowing the Kubernetes or container services, you have to think about the build tools, because ultimately source are coming and you are talking about the images, right? But you have to make the images automatically from the source code. If you want to think about doing manually, I mean, what's the point? It's the same thing you can do. As I said in the beginning itself, if it can be made automatic, you have to make it automatic. So when the code's coming, the code getting tested, if the test getting passes, you have to make a deployable image. So in that case, or maybe the binary normal cases, but think about here the microservices or Kubernetes or say container image, you have to build that image. And to build the image, you have to run some kind of shell scripting command, which will create the build. There are some certain commands to make the build, and that should be automatic. Now, what are these kind of tools which can make this automated builds? So there are multiple. One of the famous one is the Jenkins. I think everyone already might already know. So Jenkins is a very good integration, like CI/CD tool, where you can make sure the source. If you mention the source, if any source change happen, it will like automatically invoke the pipeline, and where the code will get pulled from the source, it will be stored in that particular machine where the thing is installed, and then that machine, if you set all the scripting or the shell scripting or any kind of command, if you already mentioned in the pipeline, that will make the final image, and that image you can then deploy to anywhere. Okay, so this is the kind of feature this kind of the CI/CD tools give. There is Jenkins. If you are now, all cloud providers also have their own tools. Okay, so just for example, AWS has this own AWS code build, which do the same thing, but their way of doing things a different way. Ultimately, there also you have to run some kind of scripting. I think this is a common thing, right, Mike? So everyone think like the Jenkins could be tougher, or the code build could be tougher, but ultimately the logic is in the shell scripting itself. And the shell scripting, if you move either in the Jenkins or in the code build, it stays the same. So I think that's the common part. So if you know the basics things, how the things works, you move to any code like build provider. The name could be different, the way of implementation could be different, but the logic still stays the same. So that's also important. So we talk about containerization, we talk about programming language, we talked about system. Now, what about automating the entire infrastructure as a code? Because just as a code part, if you cannot manually deploy to 100 or 1,000 servers, then how can you manually every time there is a kind of infrastructure requirement? Why should you create everything manually? Like you already did once, you know how the components were there. What if you just create a configuration as a code, or maybe the entire resources as a code, or infrastructure as a code? There are multiple names to call it. If you mention that what are the resources required, what should be the configuration of the all the resources, could be I need 5 EC2, I need 3 VPCs, I need 2 elastic IPs, I need 1 load balancer, I need the routes, all the details you can mention in the infrastructure as a code. And what you have to do, like you follow the documentation as the infrastructure as a code, then just make a plan of it. Then just for example, run it. If you see it's good and working, if it's just for demo, it will take only 1 second to delete it. Now, if you do manually, it takes time to create, and it of course take time to delete. And sometimes you forget what to delete, and after at the end of the month, you see a big bill. And this happens, Mike. Actually, one of my friend created resources, and he created in 4 regions, okay, manually, and he deleted in the 2 region, but he forgot in other region. And at the end, I think he got around $6,000 cost. So it's like, how I can manage? And the thing is, he reached out to the AWS support, and they denied it because it's not their issue, right? I mean, if it's been by mistake, it's fine. But he created manually, and he forgot to delete. So that's why they didn't refund him. So he had to pay $6,000 for that. So understand about that. But what if it was like infrastructure code? You run, like, just for this example, Terraform is a great infrastructure code tool where you mention all the resources you need and you plan it, like running Terraform plan. Then if you think all are good, like verify all the resources going to create, you run Terraform apply, and you can see all the resources actually getting created in the AWS account. And when you see it, you got done with testing and all. Now you don't need anymore. Okay, you simply run Terraform destroy, and all the resources that you have mentioned in the Terraform main.tf or any module, that all resources will get deleted. So that kind of like infrastructure as a code give you that kind of flexibility. I don't think you have ever done before. And if you do manually, is a repetitive process. Suppose one client asks you to have created infrastructure in US West 2 or 1, okay? And the next day, the client wants you to create the same infrastructure, exact copy in Mumbai region or in the London region. And you created everything there. And now the client asks you, let's create in the Virginia region, or maybe say central, like any other European region. Like, you're going to get mad if the client asks you all that. But think about that. What if you have created using infrastructure code? Simply mention the region, whatever they want to target, run it. That's it. It's done. Now, if they don't need it, delete it, and you're done. This kind of things are the coming. What are the feature that make DevOps engineers' life so much easier? And many people still don't use it. I mean, they're missing a lot of things if they don't know all these tools. So DevOps engineers should learn all these tools that I've described, and that will make their life easier, and they will get as much as possible. Like, you can see open any, like, how you find out what skills in demand. Simply go to a job site or anywhere, then look at what are the skills that is required, and whatever I just told, everything should be detailed there. They want Terraform, they want containerization, they want Kubernetes, they want sales scripting knowledge, they want some kind of cloud. Of course, the cloud knowledge is required, because suppose you have the requirement to work deploy the resources in AWS. So of course you need AWS knowledge. So that is extra knowledge you have to gain. But your primary role is to do the deployment and make sure the resources are there. Okay, it could be any cloud, but your role is to make sure that happens. The resources get created and managed as needed. Okay, you have to make sure of that. Right, so that is what are the schools what are the tools required, or the knowledge required to become a DevOps engineer. I think it's now clear to everyone.
Sandeep, really fantastic job. I'm going to key in on 2 of the 3 things that you said, and then I'm going to talk about what it takes to be an architect. You said something which I've been saying to my students for 20 years. You said, doing DevOps on one system is a little different than doing it on AWS, but 90% of it is the same. And if your fundamentals are strong, you can go straight from one to the other. When we teach architecture, I teach, okay, if you're moving a server that has 128 cores and 4 terabytes of RAM, module that down. Now, if you go to AWS and that's an X1E.32 XLG or an M128 on Azure, who cares? If I'm going to design a building as an architect, I'm not going to say, I need this factory thing from this brand or this part. I'm going to say, okay, the Burj Al Arab, let's say it's 1,000 meters tall. It's not, but it's not. And the one in Dubai, the beautiful hotel that looks like a sailboat. I'm going to say, wow, we're putting a sand foundation down because we're desert. Now I'm going to put this thing that's going to weigh potentially unsound, I don't know how many billion pounds. So now I see how deep does the structure need to be. And then I see if it's going to be this tall and the winds are like this, how strong does the structure need to be? Then I say, okay, what materials will make that structure? And then I hand it to construction people. I'm not picking out those parts. So, if it's, Cloud Big Table in Google, or DynamoDB or Apache Cassandra. I don't care. I just know I need to know SQL database. So you keyed it in so well. The fundamentals, know the fundamentals and you're good. And I absolutely loved your description of DevOps. Beautiful description. Thank you for helping out the community. Now, let me tell you a little bit about architect roles because they're completely different. Again, both critical careers, but completely different. When we're talking about an architect, we're talking about someone that's literally 50% business and literally 50% technical. And our technical is a different kind of technical. Our technical is purely design. So I get asked every day, do architects need to code? No. I've been an architect for 20 plus years, almost 25. I've never coded. And all the other architects I know, they've never coded either because they're systems designers. So what does it take to be an architect? First, it takes a lot of knowledge of networking. I'm going to be specific here. I love networking. I'm a CCIE. My CCIE number is 7417 from 20 some years ago. So you don't need that, but what do you need? You really need in networking a completely good knowledge of IP addressing, both subnetting or supernetting, which is regard to route summarization. The addressing piece is the easy part, but the design, which subnets do you put where, and how do you summarize your routes? So if you don't know what I mean, what I'm talking about is in a routing table, you may not need 5,000 routes or 20,000 routes. You may need to create some supernets, which is basically a site or range. So you could say, I have reachability to this region by coming to me. And then once the packets get to me, I can send them there. So we need really good knowledge of understanding of routing. That means routing protocols such as IGPs, such as OSPF, because they're going to be in the data center, which is connected to the cloud. It's going to need knowledge of IBGP, knowledge of EBGP. Now, it's also going to require knowledge of NAT. And NAT is not just to connect to the internet. NAT is designed to translate one address to another. Company A buys company B. Therefore, they're using the same private addresses. You need to deal with that. I want to connect to 1,000 partners, and they're all using the same private addressing I am. You need NAT there. So then, knowledge of QoS is necessary, for example, from the architect perspective on the network. Knowledge of VLANs or virtual LANs, knowledge of .1Q tagging, knowledge of Ethernet over MPLS and other WAN technologies, absolutely critical to name the few. And we're barely scratching the surface of networking. Then comes the data center technology. Servers and server virtualization, containers, just like Sandeep was talking about, firewalls and how they work, VPN concentrators and how they work, load balancers and how they work, whether it be network or application and the use cases for each, storage. And I mean deep storage knowledge. You may, as an architect, spend a day having a discussion with the storage manager in an organization. And you can't just say, I know S3 or EBS. That's not even close. You need deep, deep knowledge of storage. Then knowledge of, so we did servers, we talked about containers, we talked about storage, we talked about firewalls and VPN. IAM. You got to know IAM. The reason you got to know IAM is, how do you authenticate people and determine what they can use? You also need to understand private lines versus VPN connections and the reasons and rationale for both. So make sure everybody knows that. So now we've got some of the technical things, but you also need to know a cloud. So, what do? I have my students actually build their own cloud. We use the IBM OpenStack Ansible cloud. We love it. We see that going on in data centers. And let's face it, there's no such thing as a single cloud anymore. It's hybrid clouds and multi-clouds. And that's why when Sandeep was talking about Terraform and infrastructure as code, I love it. CloudFormation is more AWS. In today's world, there's no such thing as a single cloud. So I love it. So now we've talked about some of the technical things. Now, from here, we need to talk about end-to-end design. What does an architect do? They design a complete system for end-to-end. And what does that really mean from a perspective? I can't have anywhere near the depth of DevOps knowledge that Sandeep can because he's focused on it and he's great at it. But I need to be able to say, okay, Mr. Customer, your 100,000 servers, and trust me, with the customers I work with, that's nothing. And your 40,000 subnets and your 500,000 employees. I can bring that to the cloud and improve your performance. I can keep some here and do that. That takes knowledge of everything. So generally speaking, when I say focus your career on one thing, by architect, we're typically less deep, but knowledgeable about how the pieces and parts work together. So that's the technical component. But this position is half technical and half non-technical. For architecture worlds, you got to be good at schmoozing. I hate to say it, but it's just part of life. You got to go meet with the customer and develop a deep relationship. You need to be there. As an architect, you need to deliver presentations. 1 year as an architect, I flew over 200,000 miles on Continental Airlines, which is now United. And all that was just to give presentation. Just one airline, 200,000 miles. And then I did about another 150,000 miles on other airlines. I literally traveled 350,000 miles in 1 year just to deliver presentations. So understand that's part of the architect growth. You may be in front of 1,000 people audiences, 5,000 people audiences. You're going to present to executives. You need to know executive communication. What does the CEO care about? CIO, CTO, this is called CXO relevancy. And this is an important skill to get. I mean, it's absolutely critical because if you can't communicate to people, you can't figure out what the requirements are. You also need to understand business, and you need to understand it well. And the students in my cloud architect career development program, I have them doing ROI modeling. And when I first say you got to do an ROI model of a solution, they're like, Mike, what is this? And I say, okay, what do you predict the chances of the operation being successful? And they say 70%. I say, okay, let's take 70% times the cost of the value that we perceive. That'll give us an expected value. Now let's build a business case showing the customer that the expected value of the solution is greater than the cost of the solution. I said, guess what, guys? If it's not, redesign the architecture, because we must be, if we're a $100 million solution, we must give them $300 million in benefits. Otherwise, it's a bad architecture. So there's all this. So now you've got the leadership, because you've got to lead a team of say 15 to 20 smart people that don't work for you, which is always a challenge. And you've got to be emotionally intelligent to deal with the customers and all your support staff that are tired because they're working 16 hours a day to go build something that you designed, while the customer may or may not be mean to them. So you've got to do all this thing. You've got a great problem solving skills. Of course, in this world, no coding. And guess what? No configuring either. So you really want to put that in, because when I get students that say, I want a lot of hands-on experience, and I say, hands-on experience doing what? And they say, I want to configure all this stuff in AWS. And I said, okay, I want you to configure it too to learn how. Everybody needs to know how. I said, but as an architect, you will not be configuring. So do enough configuration to understand all of it, learn the idiosyncrasies. Wait, if I forget this thing, this isn't going to work. So you need to know that. But then for our people, it's all about design, because we're designers. We're not configurers. So I always have to tell people, like these courses that are out there, like the Udemy type courses that are basically name of the service and go configure it. That's good if you're a junior implementation engineer. But as an architect, you're never going to configure anything. It's all about the how and the why. So certain careers are more theoretical in nature, like architecture. Certain careers are more hands-on in nature. Both are awesome. I mean, they're truly great. Prepare for the job you want. Develop the skills for the job you want. And once you're there, go after it. So here's my suggestion, Sandeep. We're starting to get a couple of questions. Should you and I answer some more questions and we'll talk some more?
Sure. So
let's see the first questions in order, and I'll delegate who needs to go to whom. The first question is from XBLMA, and it says, I'm an IT technician at the moment supporting Windows 10. Where do I start to get into cloud DevOps?
Can you repeat once? I'm just checking there. Hello? Am I audible?
You're still here. Not sure if we lost sync on the call.
Can you listen? Can you listen to me, Mike?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, fine. Can you repeat I was just checking here. So can you repeat the question? I'm not finding it here.
Sure. The question is from XBLMA. I'm an IT technician at the moment in supporting Windows 10. Where do I start to get into DevOps?
Okay, so the better thing is that the person's already know about some Windows configuration. But again, I just talk about some few like basic concept like Linux scripting, because I think 90% of the cloud system you see at the moment is Linux. So learn about the Linux commands, shell scripting, then learn about the coding, the basics part. At least you should know the basics of the coding. Then learn about the deploying the code, like having the source could be anywhere in the code commit, GitHub Enterprise, Bitbucket, like anywhere. You need to learn about how can you pull the code from there. Now they all follow a simple Git strategy. So all are Git Git storage providers, but the communication, the protocol they follow are same. So you have to understand what is the communication protocol. The Git, how to pull the code and how to then process the code and then make the final binary or the final artifact. We call it artifact. So how to get the final artifact on there, and that artifact you have to deploy in the servers, in the production servers or the staging servers. So that knowledge you need to learn. Then your code is like I told you, right? How to containerize, how to deploy your infrastructure as a code. So all this you do, you have the skills required to become a successful DevOps engineer. Yeah.
Wonderful. I really appreciate it. That's a great answer for them. The next question was from Rule, and he said he passed the Solutions Architect Associate. Any guide? I actually sent a message of what is your goal career, because neither one of us are really in the position to answer that prior to getting that. So as soon as we know, I'm thrilled to answer that. So the next question is actually from Gaurav, and this is normally in the world where I would live, because it says how much networking is needed. And while I love talking about networking, he specifically phrased it as DevOps. So that has your name written all over it.
So yes, because I'm just giving you a simple example. When you configure your infrastructure code, you do have to mention what is the VPC name, what are the VPC CIDR range. Then you do have to mention what is the subnet you're going to make, that subnet's CIDR block range, and what is the availability zone you're selecting. So you do need to know about all that networking. Then you need to make sure the communication between that happens and there is no blocking. You have to make sure the firewall allowing the communication between your application server with other application servers if required, or maybe the database servers. So you have to configure all that. So you need to learn these skills or this networking level. I think the most important is CIDR block range, because the most people fail defining or dividing the network. I think Mike can explain about the CIDR block range, what it is and how can divide it. That dividing part is the most important part while you are configuring the networking in the as an infrastructure code or in the AWS console also. So Mike, can you explain that CIDR block, because I think most people are confusing on that part.
What is CIDR range?
Exactly, CIDR range, right?
Okay, so Sandeep, it's a great question. So I'm not sure if Sandeep's still speaking. Actually, what's going on is I'm actually watching the replay while Sandeep's actually speaking. So there's a delay in the call. So apologies for that. So what Sandeep was asking about is CIDR. So it used to be about 40 years ago, we used to have this thing called the Class A IP address, a Class B IP address, and a Class C IP address. And basically, Class A addresses were a /8. There was a range, but it was a /8, a Class B was a /16, and a Class C was a /24. Here's the problem. Every interface on a router or every network card in the server needs to be on a different subnet. So it used to happen when somebody would get a Class A address, they'd stick it on the Ethernet interface, and that would literally use 16 million IP addresses. But the problem was, if you put more than, say, 250 hosts on a subnet, they all broadcast stuff. They say, I'm here. And then somebody needs a MAC address and says, there's an ARP broadcast that says, who has the MAC address for this? And then the printers are beeping. And what goes on is you get all this broadcast traffic. And the broadcast traffic will literally fill up the network. So you can't go above 250 people. So what CIDR notation and CIDR ranges, and I made a video that Chris from my team can actually paste in this window, because I spent about 4 hours last week walking people through how to subnet and CIDR ranges. And we'll do another workshop on that because it's such a critical thing. But the point is basically CIDR range is the overall big range that you're using. So I might delegate to a customer, use the 10.0.0/8. And that's their CIDR block. That's all the IP addresses they're going to use for that data center. And if they got a second data center, I'm probably going to have them use a 172.16. And why am I going to do that? Because if all of the one data center is on 10/8 and the next one's on 172.16, I only need a single route between them. So that promotes routing elegancy. So what is CIDR really doing? It's basically a way of saying, hey, we're not sticking with these ridiculous subnet boundaries that came out of classful addresses. If I need a WAN link, and I only need 2 IP addresses, subnet it down to a 255.255.255.252, which guess what is a /30. And that gives me 2 usable addresses. But you know what, if I need 32 addresses, I'm going to use a different subnet. So realistically speaking, that's all that's really going with that. Sandeep, did I answer your question on CIDR ranges before I go to the next one?
Yes. Beautifully explained.
Okay.
So the point here is to less the wastage, and you define what actually you need it. Because otherwise you define that you need 60,000 IP address range, but you're only utilizing 4,000 or 2,000. So you should have defined only the nearest to 2001. So that is the entire purpose, as just makes sense. And all the broadcasters and all that's not required. But make sure when you're working with the cloud service provider, there are some limitation. I think they allow only from /16 to /32, not more than that or not less than that. So you have to make sure you read the documentation and then proceed. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Like AWS, for example, it says the smallest is the /28. And because of that, they reserve the first 4 IP address and the last IP address.
Yeah.
Now on a WAN link, it's different over your direct connection versus, so yes, you absolutely need to know that. And then you've got to work in constraints with your, what do you call it? With your actual providers. So totally agree. Next question is from Priyanka. And this is kind of for both of us. There's 2 questions. One is the career progression for a DevOps engineer. And the other question is how to become a cloud architect as a software developer. Now, I'll take the cloud architect piece, and then I'll turn over the DevOps engineer piece to you.
Sure.
So I work every day with developers that basically said, I've been developing for 20 years, for 5 years. It's been a great ride. I'm tired of looking at the computer all day, tired of looking at a computer screen, like to do something where I can maybe go out there, have an easier job, get paid a little more. I'm just tired of the daily grind. Now, I get it, but I was an engineer first too. You know, I liked it a lot. So when I get this, realistically speaking, it's the process of teaching architecture. And, you know, I wish I could say that it's a big different process for someone that's new versus someone that's a developer, but it's really not. Because in architecture, it's about moving the systems. So when someone comes from a different career or a different background, what do we need to make them architects? Communication skills, presence skills, presentation skills, plus technical skills. So we basically do the presentation type skills training. That's what we do. Now, if people that don't have us or aren't working with us, guess what? They're still available. Jerry Weissman Speakeasy, they typically run a very good class. It's about $4,000 or $5,000 for presentation skills, but it's really good. I know I invested in like 4 or 5 of their courses. I liked it so much. And well, I've invested in a lot of other courses, but that's how good they are. And I'll tell you, you know, we teach all these things included to our students, but if you're not with us, go do this. $5,000 of presentation skills training may make a 6-figure difference in your career. So go do it. And it's critical. You can't even get hired as an architect without it. Emotional intelligence training, do it. Emotional and training, Goldman, Biotis, all these other people. If it's $5,000, do it. It's included in no charge in our course, but do it. Why? People that train emotional intelligence on average earn $29,600 more per year than those that don't. 30-year career, that's $1 million. So go do it. With us, without it, go do it. But you can't get these jobs. And here's the reason. You're going to be in the room with the CEO. They're going to be basically having a funny expression. And you're going to have to read that expression, change your message, and literally find, is that person an auditory, visual, kinesthetic? Change your message. Is that person using body language that you need? Is that person having a bad day and you got to make them smile? This is critical stuff. So then there's the architecture piece. So coming from software, designing a certain thing. Now, software architects who may not be designing, may be mapping out the flow. They're much better prepared to transition to our world than the people that are coding it. So we have to teach the network and the data center. Everybody's like, Mike, aren't we getting away from network and the data center? I say, yes. What is the cloud? They just have a network done and they have a data center built. That's it. It's the same thing. So that's really what we're talking about. Knowledge of the network, knowledge of the data center, knowledge of how the cloud works, and knowledge how to take this stuff, and yes, I called it stuff, and then I work in the data center and put it to the cloud. That's the process to transition an engineer to a cloud architect, whether they come from software or some other engineering field. Now, the second side of it was, what is the career path for DevOps, the career progression path? Now, I'm going to take my side of it real quick before I turn that over to you. I've been coaching engineers and architects now for 2 decades. And I hate to say this. Once you get above a certain point where you're as good as you're going to get, the career progression is going to stall. Once you reach that principal engineer point, the career is kind of over for most architects. They're going to be engineers, they're going to be highly respected, they're going to be loved, but their salary is just going to cap. And the reason is, no matter how good the engineer is, they're actually an expense to the organization. What do I mean by an expense? I go sell a product. The engineer is the cost to build the product. So when companies really look at how they dedicate their finances, let's face it, if I can go sell $300 million of product in 1 year as an architect, I'm worth whatever that is to the company. So say 50% margins, I'm worth $150 million a year to the organization. And if I can do that, they're willing to pay me for it. So the challenge when you're taking engineers and you want to get their progression, after you reach a certain point, and my manager said this a few years ago, well, actually it's like 20. And he said, Mike, do you want to know how you go from $100,000 a year engineer to a $300,000 engineer? I'm, yeah, tell me this. And he said, it's not your tech, it's your communication skills. It's your executive presence skills. It's your presentation skills. And he says, it's your leadership skills. And he said, hey, would you like an executive coach? And I said, yes. He said, would you like to go to leadership training? And I said, yes. And then I actually spent another $250,000 on my own DevOps Golf Scouts. And let me tell you, I retired at 34. So when it goes from building an engineer career and you really want to progress, first, be an expert, be like Sandeep, be the best you can possibly be. Then potentially focus on a niche area, maybe DevOps, or maybe even there's some section of DevOps, one little Paul thing that's extremely in demand, and become great at that. And that's how you become, or someone like Sandeep. Let's say Sandeep basically knows healthcare. I used to practice medicine. Another great way to build your engineer or architect career is to do something in your industry. So when I was practicing medicine, for example, and I went over to tech, what did I end up? I ended up with the world's largest internet service provider as a lead architect. Now that did not use my talents. I mean, I enjoyed it. And then I worked and designed the network for the largest market maker on the NASDAQ. And then from there, I worked at a company called Riverstone. And then after that, I joined Cisco. Now, when I joined Cisco, I was designing the voice and data systems for one of the world's largest banks. And then 6 months later, Cisco said, we want to start a healthcare team. And I applied for this thing. I was like, you want to start a healthcare team? Well, let me tell you, when you took someone that was licensed to practice medicine as a nurse practitioner, master's in nursing, and a CCIA working for Cisco that had executive training, it was like overnight. It was like the next thing I know, I'm going from leading a small tech team to now speaking in front of 5,000 people audiences almost constantly. So that's what happens how you build your career. Either become an expert in a niche area of it, engineering, become an expert in engineering plus an industry vertical, or focus on building those soft skills, communication skills. For any of you engineers that are really good engineers that notice these people keep getting hired by companies that don't know 10% of what you actually know, and they keep getting better jobs, it's communication skills. It frustrated me earlier in my career. I was an incredibly good network engineer. When I saw what these other people are doing, I was like, I got to learn this. And when my manager said what to do, I did it. It changed my life forever. So that's my take on it. Sandeep, I'd love you to put your take on how to progress as an engineer.
Sure. So career progression in DevOps will be like starting as a junior DevOps engineer and all. Then you need to learn skills. And now problem of the skills are every year is going to change, and you will see new technology coming. You may just like next month you can see a new technology coming and people jumping it, and you can see the people that if it's like the community supporting it, they will learn it and that become famous, and you have to learn it eventually if it start as a training. Now there are a lot of technologies in the like wireless to offer, but don't learn all. Just learn what your job is supposed to be. Like you need to like configure all your remote resources using infrastructure code, learn Terraform. And suppose you really need to do configuration management all via some kind of as a code, then only you can do it via the other tools. Like if it can be done by the particular tools, do via the Terraform. If you think it will be better, like having some resources from all other resources, it cannot be happening via the Terraform, you can go for the Ansible. So think about that. This kind of tools, combination of tools, you will be learning while progressing to a mid or senior DevOps engineer. But again, there also a cap, like what Mike told. Like at a certain point, you will see your salary will stop. Okay, then what to do? So it happens to everyone. So think about, then you will see the position as like managing multiple teams. So from mid-level DevOps engineer, you becoming a like senior or like team lead, who will be managing multiple teams and training them. Not just like you become lead means what you're leading project. Not just that, you have to make sure what your team is, then they also slowly become to your level, so that you can create one replacement and then you go for higher opportunities. Otherwise you will be stuck in that position forever. No, then I think then see, ultimately after that you might become like a technical director or say a civil position. If you want to increase salary, I think, I don't know why it's confused. It's not same, but what I've seen as per my experience, a very good, like very senior DevOps engineer slowly become a kind of, a C-level architect, and they the like developers of, like I even literally seen the director of DevOps and other systems and all. So that happens a lot if you're a too much experienced DevOps engineer. So start with a junior, learn about the tool services, slowly become a mid level or senior level DevOps engineer, then lead a team, and you get the team experience, like managing experience and all, and you also communicate with your higher authority. Slowly you become the C-level executive. That's what it happens. That's the career path I have seen, to be honest. Yeah.
It's kind of amazing. I was at one company 20 some years ago, and I was an IP multicast engineer. And apparently I was responsible for 50% of the organization's revenues by designing video over DSL and video over fiber to the home. And then there was a leadership position that was posted for a director of systems engineering. And I said to my manager, I said, Joe, I want this job. And Joe says, you can't. And I said, what do you mean I can't, Joe? And he said, look, you're responsible for 50% of the organization's revenue, what you're doing right now. And you're the only guy that not only can sell it, but design it and build it. He says, you're the only guy that knows multicast. There's like 5 guys in the world that know you. Bill Williamson at Cisco, you, and a couple other people. He's like, what are you going to do? He's like, I can't lose you. And I said, I want to make this sure I understand this. I'm such a good engineer that I can't move up in the ranks. And he said, I know that sounds terrible. He said, but you're one of 5 guys in the world that truly understand IP multicast, and our whole business is basically streaming video right now. If you don't do this, what's going to happen? And I said, if you don't promote me or let me take a better job, what do you think is going to happen? So, I ultimately left, went to Cisco, and it was the best decision I ever made in my life. And if he had said to me, look, you need leadership skills, I'd have been fine. But it was the fact that my engineering skills were too good to move up. That frustrated me and angered me to the point that I was fresh into an MBA program, and I was going to do anything I can never to face that roadblock again. So I think you did a really great job explaining that, yes, salaries are very different in the US versus other parts of the world. My family's in Greece, for example. When they look at Americans, they're like, oh my God. Well, they also don't realize our cost of living here is also higher. So it all works itself out. And we do what we need to cross-culturally to make sure our students are successful, because it is what it is. So next, so Yaz has another question about coding and scripting, and Yaz says, should we skip cloud architect roles that have coding? Well, if you want to be a cloud architect, there's no coding. So if they're listing coding, it's not a cloud architect role. Now, there are so many roles that basically are cut and paste job descriptions. And I'm going to tell you about 2 things. First, I'm going to read from CIO Magazine exactly what a cloud architect is. And then I'm going to tell you how I answer the response, do you code? Because I've been answering this response now for 20 some years. So when you read in CIO Magazine, these job descriptions are crazy. Last night, one of my students, one of my favorite students, super smart, I've known him from the beginning. And he sends me this thing and he says, I keep saying this. And it has sysops, DevOps, coding. And then I said, what's the job title? I looked at it and it said senior cloud engineer. That's the reason. I said, cloud engineers do all this stuff. I said, it's so confusing. So confusing that Gartner, the group that basically determines technology trends, literally interviewed CIOs, the people that basically determine who gets hired and what they do. And they said, it's published in CIO Magazine. I'll drop the link. While I'm dropping the link to that, I've been informed from my team that I'm supposed to say, if you're enjoying this content, please like and subscribe and hit the bell to be informed of new things. I'm not Mr. YouTube, but I love the YouTube platform. So please help us out, like, subscribe for it if you feel it's appropriate. So now that we got that out of the way, now let's actually talk about what they talk about in CIO Magazine. So when CIOs were polled, here's what they said. They wanted cloud architects. They said they need someone that will lead the cultural change for cloud adoption, someone to develop and coordinate a cloud architecture, someone develops a cloud strategy and coordinates the adoption process, someone that can help find talent with the necessary skills, someone that can assess applications, software and hardware, someone that can create a cloud broker team, someone that can establish best practices for cloud across the company, someone that can oversee governance and mitigate risk, someone that can work with the IT security people to make sure the security policies are good and develop incident response procedures, someone that can manage budgets and estimate costs and operate at scale. No, they were very specific. No one heard the word configuration, not a single time. No one heard coding, no one heard scripting, no one heard DevOps, no one heard sysops. All great careers. I'm telling you, I love every last one of them, but this is what the architect does. So generally speaking, if it's a thing that's got a lot of coding, I probably wouldn't even apply. I'd probably wait for something better. But if I would, and I'll give you an example. At one point, I was hired by the largest market maker on the NASDAQ. They had more cool tech than anything you could possibly imagine. And first I was interviewed by somebody, and then I was interviewed by the CIO. The CIO was a methodical, analytical IT graduate, super smart. And he starts asking me, what about coding? What about scripting? What about this kind of math stuff? And I said, let me be clear. I am a network engineer, because that's what I was at the time. I said, I'm the guy to deal with your network, deal with your problems, deal with your system design. I'm the person that can help your systems grow. I can help you offer new services to your customer. I am not a programmer. And then he says, would you like to be? And I said, here's the thing. There's 5 or 6 or 10 people in the world that can do what I'm going to be able to do for you with your IP multicast feeds. I said, do you really want me to use a skill that's a completely different skill, or do you want me to focus on my strengths? And he says, well, focus on your strengths. And he's like, but would you be open to going to Sun Microsystems and learn some scripting and learn some this? And I said, you want to send me? Sure. So they sent me to Sun Microsystems. I developed an expect TCL script as well as a bash script while I was there that basically was like something that was worthless, but I did it and got home, and I said, I did some scripting challenge. And he says, great, Mike, but now we've got an outage. We need your networking help. So I then spent the next year, didn't even touch anything related to system design or fixing networking things. And then in the end, it was like, okay, Mike, you were right. I can't afford to lose you and have you doing scripting things. I need you in the big stuff. So, I personally say be really great at something, be open and honest. If I went on an interview and they said, Mike, I need a DevOps guy, the first thing I would say is, you can talk to Sujit from my team or Sandeep. Maybe he wants to come to America. I don't know. I'd say something like that. If they want a sysops person, I'd say, I got some good operations people. But if they want a design person, that's me. If they want someone that's more on the enterprise architect that basically does more at the high end with the CEOs and more manipulation of budgets and things like that, and finding requirements and leading a business council of CEOs, which I've done in the past, that's me. So you gotta be you. Because if you show up and you're not you in these interviews, they're going to detect it, and nobody likes someone they can't trust. So be authentic, be great. But authenticity, I believe, is really totally more important than anything else in the world. Let's see the next question. So XBLMA, if you want to become a cloud architect, it is much, much, much more than just certifications. Chris from my team can post a link to our syllabus, as well as a 20% coupon code. You can actually check out in our syllabus the 199 lessons that we have in our syllabus, and that does not include the live training that we do 2 days per week. So certifications to become a cloud architect, what I would say is the AWS Certified Solutions Architect Professional is a minimum entry-level practice exam. It used to be associate. The associate ones don't qualify anymore. They used to, but they don't at this point. They're kind of too junior.
Yeah, it become the professional certificate become the norm these days. Other also checking the other roles and all. So it's true. For the DevOps part, if you want to become like even the interview offer you want to get for the AWS DevOps role, they seeking the DevOps professional certification role, the certification. Sorry.
Yeah, it's minimum.
Yeah, it's the minimum.
So outside of that, what other architecture certifications do we like for architects? Remember, certification is 10%. The remaining 90% is something different. So what are these other certifications? Well, if we like somebody that focuses on infrastructure, we like a CCNA or CCNP. If we like someone that works on security, we like a CISSP or a CEH, for example. So it's really a case-by-case basis, XBLMA. If you want to know exactly what you desire to do, which we're happy to help you, we can actually tell you exactly for your situation. So if you want to say, I'd like desire to do this exact career, that's when we can help you. But I need to know exactly the goal career. Now, Raul basically is the next question that says, Astra AWS Certified Solution Architect, you're preferring for sysops administrator. You would love to seek a DevOps path, actually from a tech background. So let's deal with this real quick, Raul. If you want to be an architect, don't do sysops. If you want to be a DevOps professional, don't learn sysops. And I'll have Sandeep talk about this, but these are very different careers. Architects design, cloud engineers build, cloud sysops people maintain, and cloud DevOps people do all these amazing things. They help build, they help us automate. I mean, that's the role. So if you want to be a DevOps engineer, and I'll let Sandeep talk about that next, I strongly advise not studying sysops, spending extra time in DevOps, not only on the cloud, off the cloud, using all those tools, building your home lab. But now, Sandeep, for that question is over to you.
So here's one thing is that came that Sandeep, how can we crack big four companies for DevOps roles? How much experience and how much preparation I need? So for that, you have to understand what that. So there are like all the big four saying, but it could be any company, and there are a lot of tools, isn't it? You first select the targeted companies. Could be Amazon, could be GCP, could be anything. Now look at their DevOps role requirements. What are the, because every company their DevOps requirements also change. So you have to first understand what tools, what skills they're looking for. Focus on that. Prepare for those kind of services and tools. Prepare for, I think whatever the requirement that role is there, prepare for them and simply prepare for the interview. Because there is no universal kind of skills, and you cannot run all the technologies that world offer. You have to target, learn, and then appear. And again, they might look for some experience. So what you should do, simply work in some side projects or maybe existing, if it's okay in your existing project to apply all the skills, do apply that so that you can show off that kind of thing. Because ultimately the interviewer or whoever taking the interview, technical engineer, might ask you, have you worked on it? Can you show me what you've done? In that case, you can show that to people. And that is where you're selling. So you can become that company's DevOps engineer if you can demonstrate your knowledge. Demonstrating part is so important, people miss it. So demonstrate and the job is yours. So identify, learn, apply, then demonstrate. The job is yours. That's it. So any companies apply to.
I think that is really a great place. I will tell you some secrets from my experience in getting people their first tech jobs, moving up, and how to do things. Whenever possible, we like to skip HR and skip the applications. Now, what I do with my people and my students in our Cloud Architect Career Development Program is we've got 150 recruiters. Here is the process about getting your DevOps job with a recruiter or your architect job with a recruiter. Here's what ultimately happens. Organizations basically need tech people. And it takes, I wish I didn't have to say this, but for a medium performance company like a cable company, they typically take 3,000 applications to hire one person. Now, if you're dealing with a high performance company, they typically take 5,000 applications for a person. No, don't worry. Don't fall into these statistics. I'm going to teach you how not to. So here's what happens. First, normally your application goes to HR. Now, HR knows nothing about your career. They know nothing about DevOps. They know nothing about architecture. They have literally no idea. So then they go and do these cutting and pasting job descriptions from all over the world from about 5,000 different places. Now, after this, they've got a job description that's 50 pages long, has 27 different careers. They require 20 years experience and 3 Olympic gold medals. Here's what's going on here with this nonsense. It's crazy. They need 3,000 applications for a low performance company to actually be okay. So what they try and do is they try and put out these things, these job descriptions that are so crazy, they keep people from applying except for the super experienced people. Now, here's the problem with that. The people that pass this ridiculous thing that have 20 different careers listed there, then get sent up to the hiring manager. The hiring manager now interviews them, and these people know every skill other than the skill they actually need, because you can't know everything. You can't. It's not possible. To really know BGP, just the routing protocol BGP, I spent over 10,000 hours to the point when and after 10,000 hours working with BGP, I went, you know what? I'm starting to get this. says 10,000 hours to be an expert, and then 10,000 hours like, you know what, I'm starting to get this. Another 10,000 hours in BGP, and it was like, okay, now I know what I'm doing. There's still so much I need to know. So that's how long it takes to be really great at something, and all the hiring managers know that. So the hiring manager goes and interviews people. They can't do the job. They interview the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one. And because we hiring managers really don't like telling people no, we give them some kind of excuse like you don't have enough experience for the job. Guess what? If we interviewed you, we obviously thought you had enough experience. So now here's our process. We call an executive recruiter. I've been working with this guy, Steve Aquilian, in New York forever. He's an incredible recruiter, and he won't mind me saying his name. He'll be getting bombarded with phone calls from me and my people today, but that's okay. I call Steve Aquilian and I say, Steve, I need to hire a DevOps engineer. I need to hire one with a personality, because that's really important to my team. I need to hire someone with really good skills off the cloud and on the cloud. And I said, you know what? I need somebody great. So here's the process. Then he will call me back a day later. I've got this guy, Sandeep, for you. Super smart, super capable. Guess what? Not only do I recommend him and know him, you can go watch some of the videos and see what he's done. And then I'm like, I read a blog, I watch a video. I'm like, this guy's kind of interesting. Now Sandeep comes in on the interview. Now here's what's going to happen. I'm going to interview Sandeep. Let's say I like him. I'm going to say, Sandeep, just to let you know, I'm going to hire you. And he's going to say, thank you. And I'm going to say, Sandeep, now that I've made the decision to hire you, now you need to apply for the job. So I said, don't worry, you're hired. It's a formality. Just go fill out this application. Then I'm going to go call HR. I'm going to say, HR, I'm hiring this person. Sandeep's better than 98% of the DevOps engineers. I need him to be paid 1.5 times the average DevOps engineer. Find a way to put this package together for me. I do this all the time. So then here's what happens. A week later, Sandeep gets a letter in the mail plus email, and it's going to be his offer letter. And then he's going to start. I can pretty much tell you, because this happens at least half of the time. A year later, Sandeep's going to be promoted because he's awesome. Now, right after that, he probably will get a rejection letter from HR. Sorry, you don't meet the needs to work in our organization for whatever reason. Now, mind you, he's already working there. He's been promoted and he's staying there. I got to tell you, I've worked for companies for years and then gotten rejection letters from HR. Now, I've only interviewed for 5 jobs in my career and I've been hired by all 5. But what I'm trying to tell you is that's how far, when you're really good at this and you have less experience, you got to avoid HR. They are the job killers for when you're new. Now, don't think I don't like HR. I do. HR is extremely good at figuring out what to pay people. HR is extremely good to figure out benefit packages and vacation packages. HR is very good to figure out salaries in the appropriate range. HR finds people that fit into an organization's culture. That they are great. But when it comes to getting your first tech job and you're new, they are the killer. So you've got to use a recruiter. When I say recruiter, I am not talking about an HR recruiter. I'm talking about people that make their living, that get paid literally $20,000 to $50,000 for the job referral to the hiring manager. People that know people that are respected in the industry. So that's kind of the process. So let's go to the next question here, because I see a couple more coming in. Fantasy Brothers, you've recently completed the RHCSA. What can you do next? RHCE or AWS? Fancy Bros, if you want to tell us what your goal career is, we can advise you. Definitely. We're not in the position to basically tell you what certifications you could get without knowing your goal career. If we did that, we might put you in the wrong career, and that wouldn't be beneficial. So if you tell us exactly your background, exactly your experience, we'd love to help you. Vikas, Vikash, can outside US candidates get job offers in the US doing our course? Well, we've got lots of people from outside the US recently that have come to Canada or the US. Getting a job in the US is absolutely feasible, assuming you qualify for an H-1B visa, which typically happens. H-1B visas, which we fill in constantly, are basically us to saying, to the government, we can't find someone with the necessary skills to do the job. Please allow someone to come here on a visa. And it happens all the time. Absolutely. One of these is extremely easy for my team. Is the Cisco DevNac trap enough to prepare you to be a DevOps engineer? I wouldn't say so. Like, I love Cisco. My heart is at Cisco. I will always be Cisco. I spent a decade over there. Cisco is maybe the best end-to-end technology company that can meet with a customer, learn about their business, and define a strategy to improve that business's performance and support them in a way like no others. But Cisco is a networking company, and networking companies focus on networking. So you want to do DevOps, learn DevOps. But Cisco's not really the way. But for networking assurance, so let's see what we've got over here. Test Giant is very easy. You're a second-year computer science. How do you start a career in cloud computing? TechGist, I got to tell you this. I work with college students literally all the time, and I love it. I got about a half a dozen of them right now. What's so exciting about working with college students is they're in school. They're kind of learning that academic stuff that they have to get through. We teach them, or however you do it, really good actual functional skills to actually be able to do the job. And by the time people graduate, they've got a degree in their hand, which is helpful. And they actually have the skill set and the certifications and the capability to actually do the job. I've got some people in Malaysia doing that, Singapore, as well as the US, and I love doing it. I even have somebody a couple people in India doing it. When you can get someone when they're young and they learn fastest before anybody gets any bad habits, perfect. Now I'll tell you, your college professors, they're not going to have any idea what you actually know. In fact, in graduate school, I was writing a paper for a next generation bank's voice over IP system. I turned in the paper and the professor came back to me and she said, "You're writing science fiction." And I said, "No, actually, I just deployed that for a customer 6 months ago." And I just freaked their mind out. So don't expect them at the university to actually know. Maybe at IIT, for example, or at MIT, but for the most part, you're not really dealing with the university level at the same level of the people that are working there. Great people, highly educated people, professors make us and shape us. I mean, I went to school a couple of times. You know what I learned? How to learn. That skill, how to learn something, how to study something, how to develop a structured methodology. Without those skills, I'd be lost at random. So with both master's degrees, I learned a tremendous amount. I'm going to say I love school, but I'm saying, there's a difference between academic education and practical hands-on education. So that's the answer to how I would do this. Now, the next one was from Garava, and it's for Sandeep, and it says, how can we crack big four companies for DevOps role? How much experience and how much preparation is needed? He can do that, and then I can actually talk about the
already covered, Mike. I think I already covered that.
Okay, got it. Apologies. Someone from my team is kind enough to send me messages to make sure I don't miss them, because it's really easy for me to miss them. Yaz actually asked about TOGAF. I absolutely love the TOGAF certification. It's an excellent architecture certification. Realistically speaking, I typically focus more on the more practical. TOGAF is real theoretical in nature, but it is also an extremely good architecture thing. I typically focus on things that make people better. For example, a Cisco certified design expert, which covers the network. They used to have a Cisco certified design professional. It's great. I typically like design and architecture training but not in the cloud. Like the certified solution architect professional is kind of like minimum entry versus the DevOps professional, which is like minimum entry in the AWS side. But I typically really like to kind of build it with expertise in industry over TOGAF. But I do love TOGAF, and it's a great one. So the next question is going through these lists. Okay. So John Oho, for the Azure professional certs, is it necessary to study the, no. If I was going to do an Azure cert, John, all I would do is I would focus on the architecture expert and the one prerequisite exam before that. If I wanted to be an architect, John, and I know you want to be an architect. So if I was studying Azure, then I would just get to the expert pathway. Roll Thapa, is it possible for a newbie to get a job as a cloud architect? Absolutely. I mean, it happens to my students every day. Recently, one of my students who was with me for about 6 weeks, this is atypical, fresh out of school, got hired by AWS. So realistically speaking, completely possible to do it. I do it all the time. I've been getting people network engineering jobs straight out of college. This is totally fine. Here's the thing. When you want to transition from one career to another, and we're going to talk about this at 12 o'clock. At 12 o'clock, I'm going to run my How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. Chris from my team will put the link on this. I think he put it. All of you guys are welcome to join. I will tell you literally step by step by step. We spend an hour on this, and then it'll be on Zoom and YouTube live stream together. My chief operating officer, Chris, found a way for us to be in like 3 places at once, and we love it. So, we'll be able to literally ask all these questions, and we will cover step by step to exactly what hiring managers desire and what to tell them in a job interview, how to bid your resume, the certifications to get cloud architect right, and whether you're a truck driver, Mr. P, or whether you're a fresher or a wool, no big deal. We do it all the time. It's a process of knowing exactly what you need, knowing exactly what the hiring manager wants, and then knowing the tech. Now, for this hiring manager thing, I really want you to understand how important it is to be an expert at what the hiring manager cares about. If I was going to the store to buy a new computer, like right now, let's say my Mac Pro is getting tired, even though it shouldn't be with 16 cores and 192 gigs of RAM, that's 2 years old, but it's getting tired. If I need a new computer, I'm going to go buy the one I want. Maybe I'm going to get a 64-core Threadripper system with a 0.5 terabyte of RAM because it's what I desire, because it's cool. And who doesn't want that much computing power for your house? But not that it's related. Or maybe get a bigger Mac. I'm going to buy what I want. Exactly what I want. My wife buys 300 pairs of shoes. I have no concept of why. I have 3. But when she goes to the store, she buys what she wants. She doesn't buy what her friend says is good. She buys what she wants. So know what the hiring manager desires. And I'm going to tell you right now, you want to go from trucking to architecture? Great. Do it all the time. You want to go from nursing to architecture? Great. I've done it. I went from a nurse practitioner to an architect. It's no big deal. But you got to know this. The hiring manager wants the following. They want technical competency, not experience, technical competency. Why is it so different? You can be doing the same thing wrong for 20 years. I've met people with 30 years experience that aren't as good as somebody with 3 years experience. That's competency. Now, what else matters so much? I'm going to tell you right now. Honesty. Can the employer trust you? I'm going to tell you this. I don't hire people I can't trust, and nobody does either. Next, are you safe? Meaning, do you know what you know and know what you don't know? If somebody asked me to do DevOps and do a DevOps project, I'm not going to go to Google and start it. I'm not at all. I'm going to say, sorry, I really don't have the skill set here. Couple options here. Could you lend me an expert? I'll have them do it so we can delegate it out. Or would you like to send me to training for the next month? And even still, after the next month, I'm still not going to be as good as someone like Sandeep, who's been doing this forever. So, what is it your real desires are? So employers desire someone that's basically capable, honest, and someone that knows their ability, what they know, what they don't know. What else do they know? They want to know you're energetic, enthusiastic, and passionate. If you're coming from trucking, for example, or a college degree, and you've built your own cloud and done some of the projects we did, you're looking at all the following: energetic, enthusiastic, passionate. And what else do employers want? Someone that can bring out the best in others. That's your emotional intelligence. What else do they want? They want someone that can work as part of a team. What else do they want? They want someone that's willing to go above and beyond. So show that on these interviews. Make it part of your interview routine. And I'm going to tell you how you answer all these questions in the next How to Get Your Cloud Architect Job webinar, which I am actually going to do this afternoon. Chris from my team just posted the link above. So I hope I can answer that one. Then the next question is as follows. It is life and spirit arena. Please send deep steps and skills for DevOps Engineer. Happy to have you back, life and spirit. I know we've answered this, but we also understand that people come on and off of these live streams, and I want to make sure we answer that. And then after that, Mr. P, I look forward to answering your question because that one's for me. So Sandeep, if you can do the life and spirit arena question.
Sorry. Okay, so the steps are pretty simple. DevOps is all around code. It's all about deploying new feature faster to the users so they can experience it and getting the feedback. And to make it happen, you first know about how can you deploy the code. To deploy the code, you need shell scripting or some kind of scripting knowledge. So I have to learn that. So I will start with basic Linux and basic shell scripting knowledge, then at least basic programming knowledge, because sometimes there will be complicated scenarios which with shell scripting can make your life hell. So it's better to use programming languages for that. Backend programming language, not front end, just to make sure people get confused. So backend, any backend programming language, be it Golang, be it Python, being it JavaScript plus Node.js. So any of three is good to go. If you ask me personally, I will go either for the Golang or for the Python for cloud related or for any deployment related work. Okay. Now, then comes to the learning of the containerization. It will help you to the migrate from on-premise to cloud, or maybe whatever any programmer working on. You don't have to think about what kind of software they use, what kind of binary they use. Everything what they need, they can encapsulate in a container. They can give you the image, and then or maybe they can give the code, and you can generate a standardized image from the code, and that that image you can deploy to any instance as you like it, or any. Now there is a lot of services like AWS ECS, like Kubernetes. You can go and deploy your image to any this kind of services. Okay, that is that. Of course, I talk about Kubernetes. So Kubernetes kind of orchestration for the coordination services. So learn that. It's a kind of very on-demand skill. After that, you think about what are the build tools available. So source is there, like source of the Git, and there are a lot of options like GitHub, Bitbucket, the GitLab. So there's a lot of options. I will not go there. So learn any of that. Underlying all using the Git protocols or not. So learn about the basic Git commands, because we will need that when writing the deployment script. So source related thing, then the build, and the famous at the moment are the Jenkins and the AWS code build. So learn that. Now all cloud providers have their own tools, and maybe for the cloud you're going to work on, look at that tool first. If that tool is good enough, use that, because that might save you a lot of cost. That's what the native solution offer. Go for that, and then learn about the like deploying your services, or deploying a code to the particular services, because that is also required. Ultimately, you are getting the artifact or the final code from the build stage, and then you need to deploy to some resources, maybe EC2 instances, maybe Google Compute, anywhere, any cloud you have to deploy that. So learn that part. For that also, I will suggest, if it's open source, I will suggest go for the Jenkins or similar kind of tools. Now there are other tools are coming like TeamCity and all. But again, if the company can support the cost of using advanced tools, support it. If the company not willing to like support the budget, you have to think about your budget. Based on that, you can go for the open source solution. Okay, that's the point. And then the code deployment using Jenkins you can deploy. And if it's any cloud specific, just say AWS, you can use the code deploy tool. So for that. Then comes to the infrastructure automation, where suppose you have like built or configured all the resources in one region, and now the client want to deploy to multiple region or maybe some other region. To not to do that like repeated task, you can completely write all your configuration and code, and simply running some certain commands, you can create all the resources in a targeted region. Or not as general that the cloud part, you can create any kind of services or tools. For that, check out like that whatever infrastructure automation tool you're selecting. My personal suggestion is to go with the Terraform, because it's doing terrific job and it's not proprietary. So there are other solutions like AWS Cloud Formation, or maybe the Google Cloud Code Deploy, but Google Deployment, those are proprietary softwares. Okay, if you move from one cloud to another cloud, that is obsolete. But if you learn about the skills like Terraform, you can become multi-cloud. You know about all the other tools. You just need to learn about the cloud resource name, and that's it. Then you can go and configure all that. So learning open source solution will be helpful for this particular case. Then about the configuration of the code. For that, you can either learn Ansible, and there are other tools also like Shape, Puppet, whatever you see the requirement for the company. Go for that. If there is no clear requirement, go with Ansible. These are the things that you learn. And the final part I think I missed while explaining all that, monitoring part. So monitoring, there are also a lot of solutions. The most popular open source are Prometheus and Grafana. If you learn it, it will be good. Now, again, I always suggest that if the native tool is there, which can do better job at less cost, go for that. If the native tool is not good, like whatever the cloud provider giving natively, if it's not good, then only go for the open source. Always remember that part. Cost and the usability. Compare that, then only select your solution. Until if the solution already given, fine. If not given, you ask the solution. Think about the usability point of view, and of course the budget. Okay, that's the way it should be, becoming a DevOps engineer. Yeah. Okay, Mike.
Well said, Sandeep. Absolutely. And that's why I love having these kind of collaborative type discussions, because we get to bring people from different backgrounds with equally important but slightly different careers. So excellent job. Now I'm going to add, there's two more questions. One's from Natalia regarding cold calls, and I partially answered her, but I want to give her a lot more depth. And before that, the previous question was from Mr. P. How do you document your projects? So Mr. P, let me tell you what I've been using with my students for over 20 years. When I coach people, I try and look at what I would want as the hiring manager. I also ask the recruiters that I know, what is it really that your clients are doing? And then I ask hiring managers and they say, what do you really want in your perfect person? What's the real skill set they need? So that's kind of what I do. And when it comes to cloud architects, which is the world I specialize in, really what a cloud architect does is they take stuff from the network and the data center and they move it to the cloud. I wish I could say that 90% of the world wasn't just lift and shift, basically take your virtual machines in one place and put them into another, because the cloud could do obviously so much more than that. But the cloud providers have made a business choice which really scared people out of going cloud native for these kind of things. So because of this, for the most part, everything is lift and shift. Again, love the cloud providers, love what they do, but organizations are nervous. So they're basically doing lift and shift. So now let's talk about what that actually means. So if you're going to take a network and move a network, and a data center and move a network data center, you have to know the network and the data center. So when you start looking really heavy, you start reading heavily into true architect job description, they always say infrastructure experience with networking, servers, server virtualization, containers, understanding and knowledge of load balancers, DNS policies, whatever. So what do I do with my students? I got to tell you, this is what I recommend you do. Now, all of my students do this. Now, guess what? You can also do it on your own if you're not one of my students. If you're not one of my students, buy yourself a server. It must have 16 cores. So a Xeon server with 16 cores, a minimum of 128 gigs RAM, and a half a terabyte SSD drive times 3 in a RAID 0 configuration. Because what's going to happen on these servers is going to be shared storage, and you're going to need this kind of performance, or use an NVMe drive. Now that server, when I used to recommend this, was about $500. In today's world, it's about $1,500 because of the computer part shortage, which is going on from supply chain disruption with the coronavirus. That plus people are mining Chia coins, and Chia, they basically have storage, so they need these big servers that can even fill up with hard drives. Unfortunately, they're about $1,500. Our program is half of that cost, but I recommend you do it either way and how you do it. So what do you put? You're going to create a research and development section on your resume. Now make it look like a job. Give it a little bit of a job description. And if you're in a training program like ours, you can call it like the Go Cloud Architects Training and Mentorship Program or something. Or internship, whatever, some kind of concept that makes sense. And then in there, and if you're on your own, find something, call it research and development, set up server virtualization and put it in there. Worked with VMware ESXi. You know what? If you're on your own server, set up some KVM virtualization too. Worked with KVM virtualization, worked with VMware ESXi, QEMU, put it all there. Now, set up Docker's containers. Put it in there. So when you're done that, because now you've covered the compute and you've just proved to the employer, you know compute. Now set up a DNS server. If you feel like it, you can build a DNS server, set up a firewall, set up a VPN concentrator, set up NFS shares, which is basically the way Unix and Linux systems share information with each other. So there's that. Now, when you're done that, it's only part of it. You're going to deal with Linux systems sharing the Windows file clients to set up Samba because it's used everywhere. Then, okay, so we've covered the servers. We've covered VPNs and firewalls. We've covered, file storage. What does everybody use? They use the LAMP stack for the most part. Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. Go do that. Use a stock website. Put up some easy, free HTML code just to use that. I use the Apache default code. Set up that. Then when you're done it, what does everybody use for IAM? Well, guess what? They all use Microsoft Active Directory. So build an Active Directory server. All my students do it. And when you're done that, build a Nutanix cloud or an OpenStack Ansible cloud on your servers and put this on your resume. Now, if you've done any AWS stuff, you can possibly put it there, but I want you to think about the practicality of it. At least your AWS stuff too. But I'm a hiring manager. I'm looking for someone that's energetic, someone that's enthusiastic, someone that is willing to go above and beyond. These are what I want. Now I look at the resume of somebody that's got a lab and they're building a cloud. I mean, who else builds a cloud other than my students or extremely motivated people? So build a cloud. Now you've got cloud architect experience, which bypasses keyword scanners, should you not be using a resume. It shows real experience and you're honest. So then you can say, well, maybe I haven't had it here, but I've had it here and I can talk about anything to discuss your competency. See, what people don't get is somebody called me the other day and said, I went on 5 interviews and after the interviews, I was rejected because of lack of experience. And I said, did you get brought in for an interview? And I said, yes, 5 times. I said, nobody brings you in for an interview if they're concerned about your experience. We hiring managers are busy. We have no time. We only bring you in for an interview if we like something about your resume. Now, if you went on that interview and didn't get hired, and I can tell you, anybody that's been on more than three interviews and not been hired, there's a problem. The problems are one of the following: lack of technical competency, communication skills that are not good enough. For example, you're describing a technology, but they don't know that you know it because of the way you're describing it. Poor interview skills, or it could be like related to emotional intelligence, meaning you're on this interview, they're saying one thing, you don't know when to listen versus not listen. You don't know when to speak or not to speak. You don't know how to read the person, that when you're talking to them and they cross their arms like this or lean or start doing something like this or lean back in their chair, not knowing that they're not interested. So this is really the process. That's what you got to put on your resume. That's what our students do this. Now you've got experience. So I hope I answered your question there, Mr. P. The next question was from Natalia Martinez. And then after that, Life and Spirit may actually have more questions. So I'm not sure if they're for you or not yet, Cinder. So Natalia said, good morning. Are cloud architects doing cold calls? And the answer is no. So here's what the process is going to be like for the cloud architects, because yes, you will be very deeply involved in sales. Typically, big organizations have inside sales reps and outside sales reps. Inside sales reps are people that call people on the phone all day. Hey, guess what? I'm from Cisco. What is your technology solutions? What are they needs? You know, I got these great people that would love to come by, take you to lunch and see if they can help optimize your business. So the inside sales rep sets up a meeting. Then typically speaking, the sales rep is the one doing the cold call. Now, they're probably going to bring a sales engineer with them for the first meeting. The sales engineer, kind of like an architect, in that they're all pre-sales and they're designing. They may have a little less sophistication than the architect, and lower business acumen and communication skills. But you know, these are really strong, capable people. The pre-sales engineer, systems engineer. So the sales rep goes in, the systems engineer goes to make sure the sales rep doesn't say or do anything that can't be done or commit to things that can't be done, because the sales rep is designed to sell, wants to say yes, will say yes to things that may or may not work. Not because they don't care. They do care, but they just don't know. So you've got your sales rep, you've got your sales engineer. Assuming that meeting goes well, and that's probably not at the CEO level, that's at a more junior level the first time, then you come back and they're saying, okay, we finally got a meeting with the executive team. Mike, I need you to come be the architect on this. I'm going to still have the systems engineer with you, and I'm going to be there. Come with me. So yes, you will be on calls related to sales. Sales is a critical part of the process, but you're not going to be the person calling them. You're not going to be usually doing the first meeting. Here's when you do the first meeting. When Amazon calls and you have routers and switches that you need, you say, okay, let me bring one of my senior architects. Let me bring some of my DevOps engineer with me. Let me bring a cloud engineer with me. And let me bring some other people to make sure that when they ask us questions, we know what to do. So an example one time was back when Reliance Telco still existed, before they changed names or got bought. There was a period of time in India where basically the internet bubble had crashed about 20 years ago. It happened here, but it was worse in India. And there was guys working at and girls working at Reliance Telco, and they were some of the best telco engineers, literally speaking, in the world. Everyone was like an IIT graduate with like 20 years experience. And what happened was the internet industry got so bad, there was nothing for anybody to do for years. I mean, literally nothing other than to research and study. And I can remember what the call was. The sales rep set up the call, and they said they needed a BGP guy, but I was focusing on multicast. So they brought my friend Footer in, and he's having a BGP discussion with them. And then, wait, nope, it changed to MPLS. So now they brought an MPLS person on the discussion. And as soon as the BGP guy said, thank God I'm off of this call, and the MPLS person got on the call, then they were like, no. Now these guys want to do VPLS. They got a VPLS specialist on the call. And they're like, Mike, they're talking about multicast. I'm like, guys, stay on the call. Don't get off of the call. When you got this many smart people on the call, bring your all-star team. So I'm going to jump on this call. I'll go lead this call. You stay, jump off for 5 minutes to get all the official smart people and then we'll have the conversation. And we did it with a delightful conversation. Everybody learned, including us at Riverstone Networks and Reliance Telco guys. It was beautiful, beautiful partnership, and lots of cool things happened. But I guess the point is like, bring the team that you need. You never know what it is. So Life in Sandeep.
So it's saying to Sandeep, can I use 6 to 8 months to learn all your mentioned skills set with dedication? Must be one of the be highly proficient in all the tools and skill you mentioned in them will help land a job. This question is a very common question, I would say, because everybody talk that if I learn for 6-8 months, can I become a DevOps engineer? I would say I am at least, I think I have 5 to 6 years of DevOps experience, pure DevOps experience, like doing production level jobs. And I'm still learning new technologies, new application day by day. And things are changing. It's a very fast changing world. So you cannot become expert of all. No, nobody can, to be honest.
Nobody can.
So what you can do is learn the basic very, very well, because all things evolve around the basic stuff, and basics doesn't change. Only advanced stuff changes. Okay. So learn that part. Okay. So you don't have to become expert of all. Just learn it, because if you don't use a technology for long term, say 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, you are supposed to forget that because you're practicing it. So focus on what you want to learn, what you want to apply, and get a job on that technology. Because you learn 10 things, but you are working on out of that 10 thing only one thing, then don't keep learning all the things. Just what you're interested, you got the opportunity on that, focus on that. And then if required, whatever technology around that particular skill evolves or need to learn it. That's how we grow. That's how, because the DevOps have a lot of tools. I even don't know the many names of the other tools. And I don't even supposed to know that, because I don't have a requirement to that. I learn the tools that have requirements for my job. And if client want me to learn, like have something which my current knowledge doesn't have, I will simply go learn. Like I would say, Mike, you can see, I can do this, but this is a new technology. Give me 2 to 3 weeks. I will take 1 week extra, because I just, for the first week, I'll try to learn it and see the complexity. If I believe that I can do it, I say, okay, I'll be able to do it in 1 month. If I see it's not possible, it's we got a very highly, high requirement, I will say, this is out of my kind of area. Please go hire this particular technology guy. So that's how we do it. We focus on whatever technology that are supposed to work, not the entire world has to offer. That's the important part. So no, you don't have to learn all that. Whatever technology I said, just learn the basic of it, and then that will look in job. Because from the basic guys, they don't want the advanced stuff. They want to learn the basic. I mean, they know the basic. You know the basics. That's what they were seeking. Then in the job, while you're working, you will become master over time. That's what happened. I learned all this technology while working in the job. The easy, no, I will not say easy. The best part for me, I work for multiple clients. Okay, it's a freelancing business, so I work for multiple clients. So that is the reason why I have good knowledge over multiple skill set. But if I would have worked for only one client, whatever the client requirements are on that particular technology, I would have mastered it. So that's the difference. Okay, so you go to the job, whatever that job's skills required, work on the skills. You will master over skills. If there is a new requirement for the skills to come, you can learn over time. So no hurries on that. That's it.
Sandeep did such a great job with that. So I come at the world from a lot of different perspectives. I started by practicing medicine. I want people to truly understand what expertise truly is. So in the US, for example, you've got a doctor that goes to 4 years to school undergraduate. Then they go to 4 years of medical school. Then when they graduate, it's assumed they don't know anything. So then they do a 3-year to 4-year residency, where basically that's where the training actually happens. Now, at that point, people are ready for generic stuff like internal medicine. But what if they want to specialize? They do a 3 to 5 year fellowship. Okay, so let's add this up. 4 years of medical school, 4 years of college, that's 8, 3 years of internship / residency, and another 5 years. So 8 and 3 is 11 plus 5 is 16. So, not Mr. Math. Okay, so let's go look at this. Now, at the end of 16 years, do you really think this doctor is going to focus on everything? No. The heart is the size of my human fist. Do you know there's more than 10 different kinds of cardiologists that just focus on the heart? Some do prevention, some do interventional, where they're dealing with like angioplasty, some do cardiothoracic surgery, some do medical management, some do electrophysiology. Why am I saying this? 16 years of school. And still, people know they can only do 1/10 of the heart. That's what an expert is. That's why when I talk to people and my students tend to do really well, and the reason they do well is I make them so good at one thing that they're irresistible to the employer. So what Sandeep said is perfect. Now, I've got some philosophies of fundamentals. So until I shattered my foot by training with some commandos and martial arts, I used to practice martial arts every day. And I didn't just practice martial arts. You know, at 12 years old, I was doing martial arts. At 34 years old, you know, I'd wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I'd do a little bit of martial arts. And then I'd speak to people in Asia, or I should say in India. And then, you know, after that, I would speak to some people in England. Then I would take another hour for martial arts. And then I would work until 7 o'clock at night and do another martial arts. And I did this for years. Let me tell you, when I would practice and people come to my home, they're like, Mike, you're doing a straight punch. You're doing a standard elbow strike. You're doing a knee strike, and you're doing a front kick, side kick, and roundhouse kick. Where's all that other cool stuff, you know, after the last 20 years? I know it. I said an expert is someone that's an expert at the fundamentals. When your fundamentals are incredible, you can do something else. So on Friday, I'm going to speak with my friend Imran. Now, Imran and I are developing a cloud network architect program, and we're also developing a network architect program. Imran and I both together have about 60 years experience in networking, 3 CCIEs between us and 3 master's degrees between us. And, you know, we're going to talk about tomorrow about the past, present, and future of networking and how it pertains to the cloud. And guess what? It's all the same. So like people think the cloud is new. Almost 30 years ago, I was working on my first cloud. It was called Frame Relay. And that cloud turned into ATM. And that cloud turned into VPLS. And now it was like, okay, just stick your servers in the same cloud. Nothing's changed. You know, when we talk about BGP route reflectors, for example, which is the way when you're dealing with IBGP that you're dealing with non-transitive properties, that's 30 years old. You know what that's now called? Cloud Hub or Transit Gateway. It's the same tech. So when Sandeep said, get your fundamentals good. If your fundamentals are good, it's fine. I took and passed the Google Professional Cloud Architect exam in 2 days. I read the Cybex book on a Saturday and Sunday, took it on Monday, I pre-scouted it. I wanted to see if the fundamental test was true, and it was. I mean, it always works with my careers. Why does it matter so much? If you know the network, it's just a network. Does it matter if it's in Azure, AWS, GCP, Cisco, Dell, Palo Alto? Of course it doesn't. If you know what a virtual machine is, it's the same. So get your fundamentals great. Be the best that you can and watch your career explode. Anyone else have any other questions? Because we've got about 15 minutes left. Oh, before we do that, if you're having a good time, if you could please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and or hit the bell to be informed of new free videos that we do. I'm supposed to say this. I'm not Mr. YouTube, but I do care about growing our channel so we can provide more free content to the community. Anybody have any questions right now for Sandeep and I after that?
I think we have answered a lot of questions.
We have lots of people asked a lot of questions, and I love this. That's why we do this. To give people an opportunity to ask people that have done it, that are working in it, that know what to do. What scares me is, you know, I saw someone post a question on Reddit. What certification do I get? Within 10 minutes, there were about 100 answers. Answers were in networking, answers were in Scrum, answers were, I mean, they were related to every career in the world, everything other than the one the person wanted an answer to. And look, these people were very well-meaning, extremely good and well-meaning people. It's just they never thought about it like, what's your goal? What's your background? What fills in the expertise portfolio? Because they didn't know. Not that they're not great people, they're really good people. They're trying to help their fellow man. I mean, that's as good as life gets. So just speaking, you know, that's why we're trying to do this. You know, I'd like to share our years of experience to make sure we can guide you to the goal as fast as possible. Okay, so there's a couple of things. One is Michael Opiani. It's apologies. I want to make sure that we've got your answers correct. You're a solutions architect. You were initially told you don't need to code. Look, architects don't code at all. I've been an architect for 2 decades now or more. All the architects I've trained over the years don't code. But understand this, Michael, the solutions architect associate and even the solutions architect professional are nowhere close to enough to move into these architect roles. These architect roles take extreme knowledge of the network and the data center, knowledge of security, knowledge of servers, virtualization, containers, knowledge of the way load balancers actually work, storage actually works, all this kind of stuff. I mean, this is really what it's about. It's about dealing with the client, finding their business, legal, and technical requirements, and finding a way using technology to solve their business. So, Michael, would happily work with you, but please understand that the architect, even the AWS certified solution architect professional, is basically bare minimum to entry. That's basically the paper that you need, but we still need to build those skills. That's why our training program's got 250 hours, and we're thrilled to do that because that's what it takes. So let me answer that. And Andrew Brown, thank you so much for joining. Highly respect a lot of the things that you do. And we're thrilled to have you here. So thank you, Andrew, for being here. Welcome. I'm going to answer this question. How do I feel about the cloud architect title? Well, here's the way I view this. I view the cloud engineer as a really intelligent builder, highly sophisticated, highly skilled at building things. I view the solution architect as kind of a cross between a cloud architect and actually a cloud engineer. And what I mean is a good solutions architect, let's say they're an AWS solutions architect, knows a whole lot about those AWS services and how to design an end-to-end solution to solve customer business problems, and they're darn good at it. The solution architect is very technical on the cloud provider that they're talking about. So if they're with AWS or Azure, they're going to know it much better. And for that, I do agree with the term solutions architect, because it's whether it's an AT&T solutions architect that's designing customer benefits with AT&T or Azure, it's pretty indicative of what it is. Design solutions using a single customer vendor. Now, as we move up these architecture roles, and I've held them all, the cloud architect's a bit different. The cloud architect is someone that's going to be a little more business oriented, a little less technical. They're going to spend a lot more time at the executive level, and they're going to be talking to the customer about designing a complete end-to-end solution. Now, that end-to-end solution may be an OpenStack Ansible cloud at the client site combined with AWS, but it could also be merged with GCP and Google. Hybrid clouds, multi-clouds, when to stay in the data center, when to not. That's kind of more of your cloud architect role. It's the end-to-end global picture. And that's what we typically work on. And the reason we work on that is that's where my background is. So I spent most of my nearly 30-year career there, but I don't like to call it 30. 1993 to 2021. I say 25, and I've been coaching people to get their jobs forever. Now, the next up on the link when it comes in terms of business side and architecture roles is that enterprise architect role, and I've maintained that forever. If the enterprise architect role, I say we're more business than architect, in that when I take these roles, my day is spent in the C-suite for organizations and the senior leadership. It may take me more time and intel to figure out the customer's challenges and their goals. And I'm going to be doing process re-engineering. I'm going to be doing some digital transformation with them. I'm going to be designing, the systems and applications, meaning I'm not going to do it myself. That's going to be the tech people on the team. I'm going to lead it. And I'm going to design the cloud structure. So, these are the architect roles that I've had over the years, and engineering roles. And they're typically what we see in the industry, and they're typically what we have with our job placements when we're done. So that's kind of the way we actually do it, because it's not consistent. And I will say this, Exam Pro, and we're very grateful to have you on our channel. We've seen a lot of the course content out there, and a lot of it scares us, but your content is very good. We're thrilled to have you here. At the same reason, we're thrilled to have Sandeep here. Anything that we can do to truly boost this cloud commuting community is something that we're really happy for. So I hope I answered that question. And then there's
I think once is Cozy that asking
that
one
sounds
question,
all like you, Sandeep.
Yeah. So what are the core skills of a DevOps that will you will recommend to master in order to get job? What part of networking skill you do you use in your job? So I think I should answer that, and it's a very good question. So what are the core skills? First, for DevOps engineer role, what database I use? I get like client come to me and they say their application is in the one cloud and they want to do migrate to another cloud. Okay, that is the basic one, very common one I get. And once I ask it, and they want is the infrastructure as a code, so that next time they do it, they can do it very easily. Okay, not much of my involvement. Okay, so that, and for to do that, I need infrastructure as a code. I use Terraform. Sometimes it's a hard-on requirement, but if it's no hard-on requirement, I definitely go for some open source solution because that will be giving me the multi-cloud options. Okay, that's the reason. That's the infrastructure part. But in the application part, you need to understand the basics. Git, like what are the source related commands? Git commands are what you need to run. So become very good at running the Git commands. It will save you a lot of time, and it will save your life a lot of time as well. So the source code, Git commands, master it, then think about the build tools. So at least two build tools. I will say Jenkins, master Jenkins very well. It will handle 90% of things, and cloud like cloud specific skills. So I will say if it's the AWS, learn about, if you learn about Dockerization, that will handle rest of the cases. But to be more specific, if you go to the AWS code build, that can handle a lot of stuff using Dockerization. So ultimately, whatever any customer requirement are, they can make, you can give them instruction how to make a Docker image, they'll make it and you simply run it. So that kind of skills you need. So let's add the Docker configuration part. Let's add the Git skills, and let's add the basic Linux command. Because if you don't know the how to run Linux command, your life will be miserable. Like believe me, like many people come to me and I take interviews for DevOps engineer, and they don't know much of the Linux command as well as scripting, and they're not applicable for the particular job because they, as a DevOps engineer, he's supposed to run deployment script. He's supposed to create complicated logic, fundamental logics. If you don't know how to run sales scripting and senior position, that's a bad thing. And otherwise, what happened? You hire some person who don't know about sales scripting, you don't know about any Linux command, and all senior engineers are busy. They don't have time to listen to all other things, and they keep bugging the other senior engineer. See, I need help, and that other person only has a lot of work stuff, so they don't like that. And if they get annoyed much, they will leave the company and join another company. So no company wants their valuable research to go out of their company. That's the reason they will not hire you. And if I was a hiring manager, I will never hire you because you don't have the basic skill. So Linux command, shell scripting, Git commands, build tools, preferably the Jenkins. But yes, cloud specific tools are there. So learn whatever cloud you're targeting, that cloud's native build tool you should master. And then the deployment, again, for deployment, you can use Jenkins or any cloud that your target clouds, that clouds, whatever native tools they're providing, that tools you must master. If you learn all that, monitoring part, again, same, go for the open source first, the Prometheus and Grafana, like de facto. If you're monitoring, these are the best open source tool. And then if it's any cloud provider, say AWS, is anyone should go for the CloudWatch? So yes, because they are cheaper, they are less costly, you should go for that. Think about that way. So these are the base level skills that will give you, like if you have these skills, I can say 99% guarantee you will get a entry level position in any company. Okay, these are the skills they require.
Great answer, Sandeep. Again, thank you for doing this. The
next
next question.
I missed one point. The networking
go.
skill.
Keep going.
I think I told you the middle, but maybe you missed. So for the networking part, the VPC, CIDR block dividing part. So every cloud has their own virtual cloud, like networking space, like we call it isolated networking space. And for AWS, for example, it's AWS VPC. So that VPC, you have to make sure what is that VPC's maximum range, maximum CIDR block. And then you have to divide that cloud based on different availability zones, and we call it subnets. So for any clouds, there are subnets you have to divide as subnets. So let's say I have maximum, say around 60,000 IPs available in a VPC. Now you have the option to divide that as around 4,200 to each and every like subnet, or even you can half of it, whatever you want, you can do that. via the subnetting or subnetworking. So you have to learn the main network, the VPC part and the subnetworking part, and that will save your life, to be honest. That is the main knowledge you need. After that, some firewall knowledge. So all cloud have their own port blocking and firewall logic. So you have to learn that also, so that you can allow your applications to allow the input traffic or inside traffic, and allow the outgress traffic, or like outward or internet traffic. You have to understand how to allow and disallow that. That will be important. So these three, if you learn, you are all set in the networking for cloud, or as you deploy to the DevOps part. That's it.
Now it's an even more complete, better answer. That's great, Sandeep. Thank you. So the next question is on cybersecurity. Now I'm going to take this because right now I'm coaching about 100 cloud security architects, and I also have an extremely heavy security background. So much so that when I was at Cisco, every one of us was doing, mission critical security networks, was just part of it. And one day the management said, "Hey, all you guys need to become CISSPs." And we're like, "But we're doing security." And they're like, "Yeah, it looks good." So they brought in people, and I think about 10,000 people became a CISSP in 1 week, because we'd all been doing this forever. It was kind of silly, but organizations look for paper. It helps when you're doing consulting, and it's credibility. And we did a lot of consulting, so I love that. So definitely no security, because I've been designing critical security networks for about 2.5 decades. So how do you get these first cloud security jobs? And I've got a couple people that are doing it right now. So the real key is the actual fundamentals of what you need to know. So let's talk about what needs to go into security. I'm going to start with the tactical, and then I'm going to get into the more theoretical. So how do you protect an enterprise? Let's talk about the methodology to do this, because you're going to need to know it all. And then we'll talk about all those things in the weeds, and then we're going to get into things like policy and social engineering, because that's all critical too. First and foremost, here's how you would protect an enterprise. If you keep people out of the enterprise by using a firewall. A firewall is like a 100-foot gate around your house that basically keeps people from getting in. Now, right behind your firewall, because you need to know firewalls and how they work very well. Right behind the firewall, you ever notice a castle, how it's got a moat filled with water and alligators and sharks, and if you get over the wall, you're going to fall and be eaten? But just in case you survive the moat filled with alligators and sharks that are going to eat you, you have some knights that are there with swords and things to make sure that you don't get in. Well, that's your intrusion detection, intrusion prevention system. Anything gets over the firewall, it hits the IDS IPS system, either the person gets eaten by alligators or they deal with the knights. Now, that's not enough. What then happens if someone breaches that? Well, each one of your subnets is going to have open and availability. So, you should block that too with something like an access control list. Now, still speaking, that's not enough. Now that's your layer 3 stuff. Now, layer 3, you've got your servers plugged into something, right? Called the switch. So how do you lock down the switch? You do a couple of things. You can't do this in the cloud, but this is part of reality. And a cloud security architect or security needs to know this. You stick your servers in individual VLANs. By putting them in a VLAN, you basically took a switch, turned it into multiple virtual switches, and basically separated traffic, say finance versus accounting versus dev versus production. You further segmented your network to reduce blast radius and things like that. But that's only part of it. What if somebody goes into your switch and plugs in a server and it's not one you want? They can take down your network because they have access to it. So typically I would say you've got to know authentication of things like 802.1x authentication. Now let's talk more. Let's say you've got a server sitting in that environment that's also in another VLAN with 2 people. One server gets infected with a worm. Server will infect the next server. We don't want that. So when you put your people in a VLAN, you put them in what's called a private VLAN so that one server can't affect another server. So you need to know how all this stuff works too. You need to understand how you limit routes, routing information, because if you don't have a path, you can't reach it. You need to understand quality of service, because you need to be able to prioritize good data over bad data. So that's another one of your skill sets you need as a security engineer or architect. Now we talked about layer 2. How about layer 3? Let's say you've got a web server here. Well, you probably should put a host-based firewall on it. In the cloud, they have something called the security group, but you know what? In reality, use the security group and a host-based firewall. What does the host-based firewall do? If anything gets past the the firewall, and then the IDS IPS system, and then your subnets, and then your 802.1x and VLAN authentication, now you're at layer 3 and something still hacks, block that at the firewall. But that's not enough. So you understand host-based firewalls. There's this malware stuff. You got to provide some malware protection on the servers. So you need to know about malware. and malware protection. You then need to look at the operating system. Which operating systems have which vulnerabilities? And as a security architect, you need to know this. So you got to go mitigate those things. Maybe you're shutting down some services. Maybe you're turning off things. So that's also part of it. You got to know the operating systems, how to patch them, and the flaws. Now, guess what? That's part of it. So now you've got your operating system. You've disabled your necessary services. You patch them, all things that a security architect needs. Now you still have to deal with other stuff. So you've got an IAM policy to determine who's allowed on the systems, what they're allowed to do, and tracking what they did, for example. And then you take your data, you encrypt your data. Now, when you send your data from point A to point B, how is that data being sent? Is it being sent over a private network, like a wire, like a private line or a direct connection? Or is it being sent over the public internet? If it's sent over the public internet, you need to run some kind of IPsec encryption. And you must know about IPsec. IPsec, you must know how it provides the ability to authenticate each end, how it provides, for example, a hashing algorithm to make sure that a message hasn't been changed. Imagine I write a prescription for 0.1 micrograms of clonidine or catapres, and it got intercepted with a man in the middle attack, and they changed it to instead of 0.1 micrograms, 1 microgram, and a patient died. These kind of things are critical. And these are things by IPsec. IPsec also provides things like non-repudiation, meaning I can't say afterwards that I didn't do it. So these are some of the great things. Now, what else? The psychosocial components of security are really critical. There's a thing called social engineering. It's pretty easy. You go to the person in the front desk. You see a guy that works out a lot. You say, wow, you're looking really big. What kind of workouts do you do? And then by the time you strike up a conversation and add a little rapport, then basically you start asking questions. Now, what after that? You do these kind of things. Oh, by the way, I'm here. I'm from IT. Can I have a password? So there's that. So you have to teach people how to avoid common security threats. Then you need to teach people to avoid common phishing scam. Then you need to create a policy for how information is going to be managed, which affects every part of the organization. And you need to determine what every team member is going to do. Now, you also have to understand incident response. You must know incident response, because no matter how hard you try, trust me, things will break down and fall apart. So you definitely need to know how to do that. Now, that's part of it. That's a lot of it. So we talked about incident response management, policies, procedures. Now, you got to be able to quantify the risk if you're really going to be good. So you need to be able to interview the client, ideally at the executive level, understand what the assets they're trying to protect. You don't spend $1 billion to protect $1,000 assets. You've got to find what they're protecting, and you got to find out how important those assets to the organization. Because whether you're an architect or a security person, what are you protecting? And if so, what's most critical, and where are you going to safeguard it? So these are things that are part of it. Now, the second half of this is communication skills. You need to be able to not only design the system or build the system, but you've got to convince other people to adopt the system. So with any of these careers, the better your soft skills, emotional intelligence, communication skills, by far the better your career will be. So I kind of hope I answered your question there. I kind of gave you a high level overview. Like I said, we coach people with security positions every day of the week, and we love them because guess what? Everything gets hacked. And we love the cloud. And theoretically, the cloud is not less secure than the data center. In practicality, there's a lot more that you can do in the data center or lock it down in the cloud when you have control over it, assuming you have the sophistication, the people, and the hardware to do it. For other people, the cloud would be better. Why am I concerned about systems on the cloud? Cloud providers are great. But if I hack into Sandeep's house, what am I going to find? Some cool tech stuff he's working on, those kind of things. If I hack AWS, well, I've got access to all their customers if I really do it right. So the cloud is a high value target. And because of this, lock your stuff down even tighter. So hope I answered that question. So we're at the point where it's 11:05, we'll get to 11. I actually have a discussion at noon where I'm going to teach people how to get their first job. So we needed to basically come off for a few minutes. Sandeep, do you have anything to say in closing?
No, I think all done. I have a meeting running as well. I have to join that. So
I figured. So wonderful. So, if you've enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe. I think you're going to hear from Sandeep and I very soon. I'm pretty sure that we'll be on each.
So I'm planning for like I talk in Mike's channel. I want Mike to come into my channel and talk about like getting first career. Getting how to get jobs in cloud, how to proceed with the cloud career role, and all that we'll be covering that. So hope to sort of schedule that and soon to have you with me on that session. So
Yeah, and
that's
I'm
it.
looking forward to that discussion. I always love to talk about how to get hired. I'm honored to be to do that on your channel. I'm thrilled that you're actually here. I feel like when we can bring the community together of people that truly care about the cloud computing community, the DevOps community, the cloud architect community, I feel like we can really help a lot of people in a lot of far off lands. So again, Sandeep, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for doing this for our audience and your audience. I'm going to call you very soon, very, very soon. And I got to tell you, thank you again.
Welcome, Mike. And it's been a doing the exciting session. We get a lot of questions come in, and it's really helps us to understand what the viewer wants and make more session on that. Okay, and which is which is our primary goal of doing this session. We get to interact with our viewers. So that is one of the reason. And just as I was saying, soon this Sunday I'm going to release the Terraform with AWS CI/CD, and I hope to everyone will see that as well.
Well, I can't wait to go watch this video, and I'll be sharing it with my students. My students are architects, not DevOps, and I like my students to know what DevOps is and how it works. They're not going to be doing DevOps, but at least an overview of what it is. So I'll be sharing that with mine as well.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks so much, and I will speak to you very soon. Take care.